All right.
Yes, sir. And thank you very much
Hey.
for joining us on Job Seeker Nation. My name is Mark Anthony Dyson. Just call me Mark, very simply. And of course, right down from me on your screen is Jack Kelly, my co host every
Yeah.
single week here on Wednesdays, 1 p.m. Eastern. How are you, Jack?
Good. This is what, like number 1000 for
Yeah,
Wednesdays? I've
yeah,
lost
something
count.
like that. Yeah, I lost count too. So did I. And today we have with us Claudia Miller. And if you've seen my other show, she's been on with us twice. She's a career coach. She works a lot with job seekers, and she does some pretty unique things with salary negotiation there, Jack. So
Oh,
she
cool.
is full of knowledge and she's ready to go, and she just goes with the flow. I love her to death. She's a great co-partner. If I had to do my podcasting days all over again, way back when, I'd probably have her on as a regular. So we're glad to have her. Thank you for joining us, Claudia.
Of course, I'm happy to be here and I'm excited. I know we have some interesting topics to talk about today.
Yes, we do. And, if you're in the chat, go ahead and get us started. Say hi to us. Let us know where you are and where you're calling from. And we are on multiple platforms. We're on LinkedIn, of course, are one of our favorites, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. So we're always expanding and looking ways to bring some creativity to our live streams, and also bringing the best knowledge of job search and what's going on at the minute. So feel free to ask any questions. Of course, what you ask will trump what we got going on here. So the topics are pretty simple today, and we're going to start off with something practical. So your number one tip of what job seekers should be doing this September, and number one tip of something that job seekers should avoid. We're going to start with Claudia first, since she's the guest.
Thank you, Mark. Well, one of the things that I would recommend, especially like if you're job searching and September's just around the corner, just a few days away, but I would actually focus on networking now because we know that during the holidays, Thanksgiving, November, December, and even January, people kind of are just checked out or they're busy, they're traveling, they're with family, and it's going to be hard to get in contact with them. So September, October are probably like the prime months that you want to, especially now that we're getting closer to the end of the year, to start
Mhm.
connecting with people, start having conversations, having informational interviews, start establishing that rapport. So that way, when the holidays come around, you can always say, hope you have a great time, spending the holidays with so and so family member. And that way,
Mhm.
when it comes back around to January and everyone starts buckling down and really start the interview process again, you've already established that relationship and the rapport, as opposed to starting it then. By then, it'll probably be too late.
Good advice. And what is something that job seekers should avoid?
Um, I would say, like, to stop or avoid is just going into hibernation. I know that there's holidays coming up. Like I said, there's a lot of things that will be coming up in the next few months, but that
Hmm.
doesn't mean that maybe the job postings would decrease a little bit, but still apply to jobs. Not everyone is in this specific market or whatever that may be. They might want to hire someone before the end of the year so they can include it in their books. So
Hmm.
don't just think because the holidays are coming around to stop applying to jobs, to stop networking. There's still people out there. So you still want to become very strategic, intentional, so that way you're not slowing down your process, and that way you continue to create that drive and continue moving that slow motion, even if it's slower than usual. You still want to
Hmm.
continue that process because, like I said, I've known a lot of companies where they're closing out their books and they realize they still have money within the budget and they don't want to lose
Hmm.
it because that means they want to have it for next year. So they rather,
Hmm.
start hiring process quickly and bringing that person on board so they can start next year, and they can kind of protect their books.
Love that, Claudia. Thank you. And yes, I think you shouldn't take your avoidance tip for granted, because people do tend to freeze up when there seems to be a lot of competition, even that they're afraid that they won't be seen or be noticed. Jack, what you got going on? What
Yeah.
should job seekers be doing, and what shouldn't they do?
Yeah, you stole my thunder. That's what I would have said. So I couldn't put it better than you did. You really framed it well in terms of, people starting to get their act together and look and be proactive. The only thing I guess I could add to that to amplify what you're saying is, um, and I was talking about this a little earlier today with Lauren Grafe.
Mhm.
With the FDA approving the vaccines, you know, the odds are that it's going to make companies and people feel a bit more comfortable as more people get vaccinated. And if that happens, that should be good for the job market
Mhm.
because, a lot of people have been, hesitant to go back to work, fearing COVID, fearing the new surge of the Delta variant. So that if more people now are vaccinated, it could be the ones who are on the sidelines are saying, you know what, I've been holding off. I'm going to kind of go back. Um, or I wasn't looking because I don't want to go to a company I don't know, and I don't know if they're vaccinated or not. So it's easy for me to stay where I am and not move. So that might free up things. And then also for companies, I think with companies then, you know, that's one less headache they have because up until now, they're trying to balance what do we do? Do we
Mhm.
tell people to order people to be vaccinated and wear masks, but that might alienate some other people and they may leave. So they get caught in this quandary. And then the people who have been vaccinated are complaining, hey, I don't want to work with someone else who might infect me. So with this, with the approval, now it makes, these companies say, hey, you know what? I don't have to make the decision. The FDA did it. It's
Mhm.
now, it's approved and you should go doing it. So then companies could probably open up more jobs that maybe they were holding on to because there was still that uncertainty. They're not sure what to do. Um, so yeah, it's interesting. So and this goes back to Claudia's point. So given that, it makes sense. Yeah, not even wait till September 1st today. Just go out
Mhm.
there today and start doing, getting out your resume, getting in touch with, career coaches, resume writers, recruiters, and get the ball in motion. Because there's still going to be a lot of people who are going to be hesitant or just enjoying the last bits of the summer or just still just worried about stuff. So if you get in front of the crowd, you're gonna stand out.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And within that, did you mention your number one tip that job seekers should avoid?
The job seekers should avoid. I would say this, and this is going to probably keep going on for the foreseeable future, where there's going to be
Mhm.
uncertainty. You're going to turn on TV and you're going to hear the news anchors just, doom, gloom. This is, everything that's terrible in the world, everything that's falling apart, everything that's awful. Here's the next thing to be scared about, and you just want to not pay attention to that. You just want to go. You have your agenda, whether it's advancing within your career, whether it's finding a new job, pivoting to something new, reinventing yourself. Don't get distracted by everything else going on because it could drive you nuts. Just keep going forward.
Yeah, yeah, great, great stuff. I'm going to say it bites off a little bit of what both of you said. Informational interviews, I've talked about at nauseum, and I talk about even how people should be doing dozens of them. At this particular point, in this point of the game, it's not going to be surprising that a dozen is going to be just scratching the surface because a lot of companies are a lot slower in hiring and they're being a lot more judicious about the way that they're accepting people into the hiring process. And don't forget the hiring process itself now could be up to 14 interviews.
Yeah.
And I just heard something the other day that just blew my mind, of even doing several video interviews instead of just meeting with a person somewhere in the third or fourth interview. So I think that one of the things is definitely having to endure
Right.
that process in between. But while you're interviewing, you should try getting multiple interviews. And I say that because it really, the process is going to be so lengthy. What should take 45 days used to be like too long once upon a time. Now it's becoming like, well, I haven't even had my second interview yet. And I was promised a second interview, and it's taking that much longer. So I would say that if you have to be able to endure, but don't stifle your ability to move things forward somewhere else, because
You know, you Mark,
somebody's hiring process is shorter than the other. And if you got favorite companies, if you're targeting companies, you got that list. Even though you may not hit number one yet, number 10 and number 9 may be far apart in the process, and that may help you. Now you may have to make some other choices. And I know, Jack, you got a question coming on,
yeah, well, a couple
but
things.
go
Couple things.
ahead.
Let me ask you this, because you know what? I know there's so much talk always about informal interviews, conversational interviews, what have you.
Hmm. Hmm.
Frank, I don't see them happening. Maybe it's just the
Not
space I'm
enough.
in, but I
Not
just
enough.
really don't see that at all, because it's hard enough for someone to get an interview. And I know you're saying, hey, go for, get a lot of interviews. It's not easy. It depends what sector you're in. So like if you're in a certain area, let's say you're in the rest
Hmm.
right now, like, the service industry, hospitality, restaurants, bars, gyms, things that benefited once where you're open. Yeah, there's a lot of needs and maybe you can. But if you're kind of in a mid level to senior white collar kind of role, it's not easy. It's not easy to get interviews. It's not
No.
easy to get multiple interviews. And it's unfortunate, because I
Yeah.
agree with you, Mark.
Yes.
To find, a really good job, you want to compare and contrast. You look to buy a new car, you're going to look at different cars and try to find the best deal. You want to get an apartment or a house, you're going to look at a bunch. But sometimes when you're looking, you don't have that luxury, which kind of stinks, because it's
It
hard to make sure
does.
if you're making the right decision.
And I think that's a great point. And I think if you are having time, try to shrink the production aspect of it. In other words, some people go about and say, "Can I have the information to interview with you?" And it's like, oh gosh, come on. We're not kids here. Ask somebody for coffee, ask somebody for tea, ask for somebody 10, 15 minutes of their time. Ask for the smaller amount of time. You know why? Because most people won't schedule 10 or 15 minutes time. They'll just be able to say, "Hey, yeah, sure. I got a few minutes here," and make the best of that time. Even if you have to come back to that person a little bit later, that's fine. Get the conversation started offline, out of the way of LinkedIn or any other place. Get to a Zoom, get to a phone call, whatever's going to be the most convenient for that person. Because for some people, they'll pick up a phone a whole lot quicker than they pick up Zoom. And those conversations still matter. So I would say shrink the production aspect of it. Don't make it a big to do for them. Make it really easy for them, and make it easy for yourself ultimately, because the more people you talk to and they're able to say, "Hey, is there somebody else I should talk to?" Maybe shrink those questions down to 2 or 3 questions. And then, you either have to have enough intel for you to say, "Hey, I have enough here. This person's not gonna, maybe I could come back to that person." That might be even better, because the second time, some people need multiple touches in order to really get information. But it is, I always say, information interviews doesn't have to be that big deal. It's like working yeast through a batch of dough. It takes some time, it takes some manipulation, it takes some working through. And people should do that. And the avoidance part, the thing that people should avoid is they should avoid trying to get a lot of information in a little bit of time. When you're meeting new people, people are tempted to do more selling than anything else, and it could be a little off-putting. You want
Hey,
some
Claudia,
multiple
let me ask you,
touches.
do you
So
see much about
go ahead.
informational interviewing, or what do you see in that space?
Yeah, I have my clients doing informational interviews, typically for like every 10 people they reach out. Now, because of COVID and getting COVID fatigue, they would get anywhere between 3 to 4 responses. But another quick way to kind of capture their attention would be going on LinkedIn and doing like in quotations, put hiring for or reach out to me or looking for, and then filter out by company name. So when they put a post, "Hey, we're hiring for a project manager. If you're anyone that you know are interested, please message me," then that's a perfect time to say, "Hey, by the way, Jack, I saw your posting. You're hiring for a project manager. We'd love to learn more. Do you have some time available, Friday between 12 and 1? I would love to talk to you a little bit more about the company and the culture itself." But you want to make sure that you stay active there, because if you respond to them the sooner that they actually put that post, then we know they're online and they're more quicker to respond to you. So I do agree. It's a little bit less than what it used to be, at least for some of my clients because of the market we're in. But
Mhm.
that's a different strategy that some of the job seekers can use that can help them get those quick informational interviews. And it's great because that person's asking them for you to reach out to them as opposed to the other one.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
And then so it's like almost like you have to be the first one on it when you see that pop up to kind of get in front of them. Is that kind of what like a little hack you saying?
Not, I mean, obviously it works best if you're like the
Yeah.
first one. But obviously if it's like 6, 7 days ago, they might not as well be prone to it. Maybe they already started the interview process.
Right.
So you can always put like an alert, or you just check on every morning, like hiring for, and then see who is asking for those. And if you're more intentional and kind of to what Mark was saying, you have a list of like 10, 15 companies you want to go after, well, then you can create that search and it'll be easy to find all of those companies. And that way you can reach out to those people that are looking for someone within that role or within that department to kind of get your foot in the door
Mhm.
and start that networking and information process.
Yeah, and you can actually use Hootsuite or even just the straight Twitter app and do that same search. I
Mm.
would put those, whatever your search terms are, in quotations so it will minimize the fluff of those searches. You can also make a Google alert to do that, and you'll get a much broader way. You'll have to tweak that a little bit more often, but when you put things in quotes, particularly on Google will shrink it and give you a much leaner search choice than if you just left it without the quotes. That's a search tip if
It,
you could do that for anything. But yeah, Twitter and LinkedIn, they're really great for doing those narrowed searches. And you can even search for people by whatever title that they have. So you can go to the search engine and search for people and then put it in the title, and you'll get a much more streamlined search that way as well. But I would say, yeah, try multiple ways in searching and come up with different people and different types of lists, and you'll be exposed to more variety of choices of the right people. And of course, you want to choose somebody who is actually uh, active on LinkedIn, so you can go to the person's page and go to their activity to see if their posting pattern is once a week or once a day. The once a day, of course, you're going to more likely get a more timely response. But I think ultimately people have to look at how their timeliness, and if you're desperate, of course, then it's really becomes 10 times harder because you have to make some choices, and you got to make some choices a lot quicker, and that's going to be the way. But I would say even at that, you should avoid being desperate or getting in that situation. If you have any inclination at all to start a job search, this would be the time now. And if you want to throw in a tip, if you're a career coach or a career professional, if you just gotten a job recently and something we haven't mentioned here, feel free to put that in the chat. We'll be sure to highlight that for everybody else. It's about helping everyone else. And if you are on and you're just wondering what to do, just say hi in the chat so we know that you're around. Let's move it along. Did you guys have anything else to add before I move on from this one? Good.
I have a quick
Uh,
career tip.
sure.
I
Go
know
ahead.
that kind
Go
of
ahead.
like what Jack was mentioning, there's very few opportunities. And I agree, especially when you're at a higher level. I would
Mhm.
recommend kind of like to that point originally of networking with executive recruiters. Now they're so busy that you almost have to manage them. You have to remind them. You have to really put yourself up front, asking them like, what is the hardest skill to hire for someone in a VP of sales or chief marketing officer. And then that time, if you don't have that skill set, use November, December to build all those skills. Take a LinkedIn learning, whether go to Udemy or just
Mhm.
shadowing someone. Use that downtime to use that to your advantage. And
Mhm.
I always recommend a three-prong approach where one of them is through networking, and then you're going to find opportunities through there. Two, of course, through job boards. And then three, optimizing your LinkedIn profile for job searching, because it is a different strategy. So that way recruiters are able to find you and they can reach out to you for opportunities as well.
Yeah, sounds good. You concur, Jack,
Yeah,
being
that
a
makes sense. That's
recruiter in the
great.
house. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Great, good deal. All right, so let's move on. This is a hot topic, and I'm gonna kind of skip around what I originally had put out there because I think this is something that's really important. Job hopping is something that Jack, you wrote about in
Mm.
particular. I just made it more succinct so everybody. So I think we're going to have a little bit of a robust discussion on this because I think there's a philosophy between generations of job seekers. The older generations, Generation X and baby boomers, said, well, you should stay at a job at least X amount of time. However, millennials and Gen Z are saying, this ain't working out in 9 months. I'm out of here. And they're moving on. And I think it's perfectly acceptable. I've accepted the fact a long time ago that that was going to head towards that type of job market. And I think we're in that kind of job market now. If when people see something better or they see a loophole in the way that they view, they're going to go for it. So really, what are job seekers going to do in the future? I put my value up there is that I think more people are going to be independent contractors, and I think that's starting to really start to trickle down to other industries. Should people hold on to their traditional thoughts about job seeking, or they're going to have to disrupt the way they think and think about the way that the younger generation? And if you used a term there, maybe you remember what that term is, Jack. But I'd like you to go first and kind of give us a little background on what you see and what you wrote about.
Yeah, I think it's really a big difference now where I think let's take the Gen Z generation. They've
Hmm.
seen what their parents went through. They saw the financial crisis. Um, they see what happened during the pandemic, massive layoffs. They realize that there's not a whole lot of corporate loyalty. So they're thinking, hey, I'm going to do what's right for me. If the company
Hmm.
is not going to be loyal to me and they're going to just, I could do a great job, but then sorry, we have layoffs and let you go, they're going to manage their own careers. So that might mean, hey, I'll only spend a year at this company or 2 years at the company. When I first started recruiting, I remember if I shared a resume with someone who's like maybe only 3 years or 4 years at a company, no exaggeration,
Hmm.
5 years, they say, "What are you doing, Jack?" That's they can't move. Fast forward now, it's become commonplace. You're a year, 2 years, and then you move on. And you know what? I think in a way, why not? It's a free agency kind of economy where, hey, you
Hmm.
got to do what's right for yourself. You got to make your own breaks. You got to find your own opportunities, and you can't just depend on one company to say, okay, you're going to stay here for the rest of your career, get a gold watch and a retirement package when you leave. Because first of all, you don't get a retirement. You're not going to get a gold watch, and you're probably not going to be there for 10, 20, 30 years. So I think in a way, it's probably healthy because and then every time you leave,
Hmm.
every time you go to a new job, you're going to meet new people. You're going to build out your network. You're going to get new skills. You're going to learn new things. So as opposed to someone staying in the same company for a long time, that just kind of plateaus. So there's a lot of benefits to it.
Yep, yep. And by the way, Claudia, I wrote an article not that long ago that said ignore your parents' advice. And when parents are more likely to say, "Well, you got to play the game." No, you don't.
Mhm.
But go ahead, Claudia.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with both of you. I definitely think that now we're kind of in that age, especially with companies, where it actually moving and switching companies or different types of roles or departments actually makes you a very, it sharpens your skill set and makes you a valuable asset because you get exposed to different processes and best practices where you might have already had competitive intel and they can bring you to the company and know exactly what worked and didn't work at their competitors. But also, the other thing I would say is caution with it because depends on how you're telling your story. If they
Mm.
ask you why did you switch job why did you work at 3 different companies for the past 5 years, and your answer is because I didn't like it or it just didn't work out. Honestly, that's not
Or
good
they're
enough.
not
I
going
want to know.
remote.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but if you have your story and it's in a different light of saying, one of the things that I knew I wanted to do was work at a top manufacturing company within e-commerce. And I knew in order to get there, I needed to learn domestic and international, not only e-commerce in like $10 products, but also at $300 products. And that's why for the past 5 years, I strategically worked within these past 3 companies to help me acquire the skill set I needed to do so in order for me to be able to apply to a company like Acme. And now I know I can bring that valuable asset to the company in itself. And not only that, I listened to your earnings call and I know you're looking to penetrate that $10, $15 market, and I've already been able to do so. So I'll be able to bring the company and the team on board and be able to bring in all those best practices that I've learned in the past few companies and be able to really get a head start and able to, penetrate that new market. That's totally different than I don't know, it just didn't work out. So make sure you have that story that really connects the dots on why it happened and what is the benefit that the company or team gains from it.
Claudia,
Yeah,
that's so on
great
top. I
stuff.
agree with you so much
Great
because it
stuff.
makes so much sense. Where a lot of what I see as a recruiter, companies will come to me and they want someone from the outside to come in instead of promoting someone internally because they figure the people internally, they just know what they know. And if you get someone from the outside, like you're saying, they bring in some new insights. Here's what worked at this company. Here's what didn't work. And so there's value to that. And then, but
Yeah.
you also raise a really other good point because I see this a lot where even if people get it's a new change with job hopping and moving around a lot, when you start discussing the moves, there comes a point where sometimes the hiring managers just after a while like, all right, am I going to hire Jack or Mark because I keep seeing them moving? That means they're going to leave in another year and I'm going to have to go find a new person, train that person. I'm going to take a pass. So even though it's evolving where it's more acceptable to move around, I still feel if you jump around too much, it could end up because Claudia, picture yourself. If you get, let's say my resume and you see every 2 years I'm moving, you're going to in your mind think, okay, why am I going to be different? In 2 years, I'm going to leave you and go to Mark. So you're like, do I really want to invest 6 months training him? Maybe not, but that's something you got to be prepared for.
Well, what I think is becoming interesting is that people are, and I think the younger generations, the millennials and Generation Z, they're beginning to understand as well is that, and hear me out. This is a theory. I think they're also looking at what companies are offering as far as advancing their career. Back when I was coming up, you and I, Jack, particularly, the way you advance your career, you become a manager. Now, you don't necessarily want to become a manager. And not only that, but really many times the salary jump from being a regular person to a manager isn't all that much. There isn't that much money. But by theory, and most of the time, when you're jumping between companies, you get more of a boost of a salary. I mean, typically, even if you're making a lateral move, 15% is kind of the bottom what you'll get. That's better than the 5% you may get when you're jumping from just a regular rank and file worker to maybe an office, not an office supervisor, but the first line supervisor role, or even to a manager, is not that big of a jump in many cases because you're new and you don't have the experience and you really can't ask that much, and they think they're giving you kind of a lead in that particular sense. But I think now people kind of understand the game. I make the most money by going from company to company after I've been to 4 or 5 companies, and it's obvious then that I'll be given that role, not particularly that I have to interview or go jump through a bunch of hoops. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
I
It's
actually, go ahead,
no,
Jack.
sorry,
Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry. Go
Claudia.
ahead, Claudia. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was going to say that to that point, I definitely agree. Where you make the biggest jumps is changing different companies. And I actually had a client where she was making 90,000 as a data scientist, and she just made a lateral move a year after being with the company because it was just being too much. She was being overworked, burnout, and it was within consulting, and went in-house and got a jump up to she was making 150,000. So from 90 to 150, and
That's a
I'm not
nice
even
move.
including, without
Yeah.
bonus or stock options. But just to that point, like there are so many companies out there that are underpaying, and that's why they are not staying competitive in this marketplace because they have a huge delta to meet. Not only they were already underpaying before, but now that it's competitive, they just can't even withstand that chance, and that's why they're losing top talent, and that's why people are moving. So I definitely agree. if there's no promotions internally, start looking externally as well, and you'll start seeing those big increases.
Hey, Claudia, if you don't mind my asking, so what kind of data scientist, data analytical role is that?
It was within a consulting company, so they had to. It was like they did machine learning, artificial intelligence, NLP. So they actually created algorithms and kind of like these systems where they fed a lot of that data in order to create a specific tool or outcome. So, for example, what I can think of top of mind is this manufacturing or pharmaceutical company was losing around like $20 million due to like discrepancies, change in policies, how much every state or federal were paying out for these different medications. She created an algorithm and a program that now it mitigate that $25 million loss to now $5 million loss. And the system was able to
Wow,
capture
okay.
all those payments out quickly in almost real time. But that's kind of like the data scientist work that she did, and she was getting made 90K, and she made a jump to 150, and now she's getting approached by like big companies like Google, Facebook, just top of mind right now.
See, and that's a great point. That's a great way to illustrate the difference. So that's what to go back to Mark's point earlier, I think if you are really good at what you do and you excel, you could probably get more money because like you're a rock star and do it. They're not very rock star management people, kind of middle management sometimes, they are what they are. So you can't shine as much. So there's only so much room. So yeah, it's like almost like a sports team too, where the manager is a manager, but if you have, in the NBA, LeBron James, they can make way more than a manager. You can't compare. It's, not even close. So you might, if you're really, really good at what you do, and you excel, yeah, you're better off. Why do you need to manage? You make more money. And the reason I'm asking you too, because this whole thing, what we do here is more about, job search, networking. And when my ears perked up, because my son's graduating this month, and he has a dual degree in finance and data analytics. So when you said, go from 90 to 150, my ears perked up like, okay, that's good news. Is she like an IT person, or is it just numbers oriented?
A little bit of both. So
Yeah, okay.
She actually has, through our research, we found out that the biggest skill set and asset that she has is she can speak to both technical and non-technical teams, because she actually comes from an architecture background. So
Okay,
she
cool.
made this pivot, and now that becomes her market differentiator. She can speak to both. She has that business acumen. She can speak and work with clients and then go back to the technical team and say, well, here's the data that we've gathered. We need this information. This is like the coding we need to do. Let's review it. Is this performing at the way that it should? And let's keep testing it until we get to that accuracy, what we're looking for, that's going to at least make this beneficial. And this is all done within 2-3 months, which is ridiculous to me, but that's kind of like what the work that they do. And there's so much progression happening within the data analytics world.
Yeah, because this is what I see, guys, is that if, a lot of the needs are in these very super niche kind of things. And if you have those skills, then you have the cards. You know what I mean? So it sounds like your client had those weird, specific, mishmash of skills and found the right company that's like, hey, we need that. So that's a really interesting too. And sometimes it's hard to put together. Sometimes it's just luck, right? That she ended up having the architecture and the data science and the technology and all together. And that's probably why they paid the big premium, because the other company was like maybe taking a little advantage of her and not giving her what she should be earning. The other one's like, oh my God, you're a diamond. We don't get these too often. We're going to pay up for it.
Yeah, and one of the things now that she's doing is she's not looking at any job opportunities unless they pay around 215, 220, because she's realized the value of her market, like what she's worth to the market, and now the additional skill set she's gained. But again, you have to be very intentional, and she knows that she's only going to make that change when it's right for her and the company, and her lifestyle as well.
That's great.
Well, I got a question, and Claudia, you can answer this regarding, because I want to go a little bit further down. Now that you piqued our interest and you whet our appetite, so to speak, and this, how does she network? And I have some theory about that, but you go ahead and you tell it, and I'll see how it aligns.
So when it comes, are you talking about networking for job searching or position herself as
For
an expert?
even I think all of that's kind of inclusive now at this particular point, right? You've gotten so far, and you're only going to be interested in, so for her to find those opportunities, or maybe those opportunities might be finding her at this particular point. How is she going about connecting the dots from company to company, and maybe is she finding referrals, or is she seeing these positions within her network, like in a professional organization? How is she connecting those dots in that way?
So she's actually having recruiters from Google and Facebook reaching out to her to see
Hmm.
if she'd be interested in a role and will be interested in applying for these types of roles. And what we did is we made sure we're very strategic with LinkedIn. So most people, for example, if you look at my LinkedIn, it's more for job seekers. If I'm looking for a job, my LinkedIn profile will not help optimize that. But if I was job searching, I would change everything, the layout of my LinkedIn itself. So if you're job searching, make sure that your LinkedIn is optimized for job searching, not for selling, whatever services you may be, if in case you're in selling industry, or if you're trying to market and get new clients. There's different strategies for each. But if you're job searching, your LinkedIn needs to match that. It comes around with the messaging, how you brand and position yourself, knowing exactly what keywords they're looking for. And if you have all of that, it will set you up for success, where all of a sudden, all a recruiter needs to do is, do a search. Your profile, if it's optimized, should land in the first 1 or 2 pages of their search. And just the headline itself should be able to captivate their attention so much that they click on your profile. And once they're there, they're sold. And now it's a question of whether the employee or candidate is even interested in applying for that role. So that's how she gets a lot of these opportunities, these interviews, people reaching out to her. And she is very set up for success because of it.
That's great. You guys,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the
Go ahead.
train schedule changed a bit. I have to head out, Laura. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But you're in
We'll be
capable
fine.
hands with Claudia. She's awesome. It's a
Yeah.
pleasure to
Thanks,
meet
Jack.
you. Thank you
Yeah,
so
yeah.
much. All right. Sorry,
All right,
guys. I
Jack.
have to head out.
Bye,
Take
Jack.
care. Okay.
Yep,
Bye-bye.
and be sure. Go ahead, Jack, and be
Thanks.
sure you look for Jack on his live stream on LinkedIn. The
Thanks,
future of
guys.
work. We'll see you
Bye-bye.
later, Jack.
Bye.
And so, Claudia, good. I get you all to myself now. Uh, well, and it goes along with what is obvious, and people haven't picked it up. And I do get questions regarding working with recruiters, and one of the theories it's not a theory, I think is true. And someone taught me this that was on the show years ago. He said companies are more or less like copycats in some kind of way. You're getting approached by Google and Twitter because you work for Microsoft, you're getting offers from LinkedIn and Twitter because you work for Facebook. Understand what I mean? Big companies track big companies, so when they see a big company on the profile, or if they see a small one, then you have to have some other things that kind of lined up for them to get poached by them, as opposed to if you work for Facebook now, of course they know that you know the deal. Twitter might be interested, YouTube might be interested, and so on and so forth. So the big tech companies kind of work with that, and I think that's the same along with every type of industry. Does that make sense to you? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and kind of to that point, kind of related to before, it is very
Uh-huh.
common for employees at Apple, Google, only spending 1 or 2 years, because then they get poached by other companies because
Yeah.
they know how valuable they are, or at least they have that intel knowledge. So that's
Hmm.
why in the tech industry, it's not looked as bad as a job hopper. They're probably thinking you're probably getting poached because you're so good at your job. That's why
Exactly.
they're coming after you. But again, it's all about like how you're reframing your background, the jobs you worked at, how long you stayed there. But it also can be like, let's just say if you're working for like a small or mid-sized company and you don't have that, Fortune 500 fast-growing company brand name on your belt.
Hmm.
You still want to be able to optimize your LinkedIn, because like the client that I have, like they don't work for like a fast-growing company. Now they're getting approached too, but she actually doesn't work in there. And the reason is because how we branded and position herself. So
Hmm.
now, for example, if you're a project manager, you can in that headline, it's huge. It's a big real estate on LinkedIn. And I know
Mhm.
for LinkedIn, the default is job title at blank company. So project manager at Acme, LinkedIn's default. That's not going to help you stand out in the marketplace. It should be
Mhm.
project management professional with 10 plus years of experience within manufacturing, industrial, and e-commerce, managing over $50 million in projects on time, um, and on budget, or something along those lines, where all
Right.
of a sudden I know you can manage $50 million projects. We are in manufacturing, and you're already working in manufacturing. Now I'm interested in you, as opposed to something generic of project manager at Acme company.
Yeah, well, I can see where keywords are going to be pretty important in that particular space because keywords are, in other words, a lot of people don't pay attention to them like they should because they don't realize that maybe the company itself is an older company and they're using an older title as opposed to using something that's newer and that does align with what you use. So you want to use the more newer title. So you want to search for those titles, look for people with those titles to make sure that those duties do align. And if you don't know for sure, contact person and ask just that one question or those one or two questions that will help you. That's still an informational or a business conversation or whatever you want to call it, information interview, despite what you want. The intention is to get more intel to move the needle forward for yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's a linear thing, but I think the networking part is very important as well because people think that you always have to, try to get the referral when really the part of LinkedIn is to find leads that you don't see that somebody else see you might be a good fit for. So it is great for passive contact, so to speak, if we can term it that way, because there are people always looking for people for roles, and you may not know who is looking, and that's exactly why you want to have the right kind of profile, the right kind of presentation, because presentation is everything on LinkedIn, as you've inferred already.
Yeah, it's very important. And I know there's philosophy of your resume should not match your LinkedIn, and there should be. I don't agree with it. I do think at least like your resume should match your LinkedIn, because recruiters or people, hiring managers are looking for talent, are not always
Okay.
going to have a resume. So
Yeah.
you want to make sure that your LinkedIn can be similar or be used almost as your resume. Now you're going to have a lot of back end like settings, optimization, skills,
Mhm.
recommendations. You include a lot, create a more robust version of your resume, but it should match, because I was reading a stat where a lot of candidates tend to lie on their resume. So if their resume doesn't match their LinkedIn profile, kind of sends a red flag. Like, are you lying on the resume? Are you
Right.
not willing to put
Right.
this as public information? Not
You
you're
should include
hesitant.
points. Yeah, you should straightforward put points and accomplishments from your resume to your LinkedIn. Sometimes you may have to reframe it because of the type of stories that you tell, but ultimately, yeah, you should be able to take your main bullet points, your main selling points, and put them in your LinkedIn profile. And that way it should match. You won't have a long summary on your resume. So, of course, that story is going to be a little bit more um, focused on your abilities and what you offer, more intensive that way, as opposed to resume art quick hits. But the story should line up for sure. What you did, what they're interested that what you do with what company also matches on LinkedIn as well as on your resume. So I think that's important. But I think as well, the origin of a lot of this, what we're talking about, is the idea back in 2014, DeVry University's Career Advisory Board came up, did a survey, and the result were because of the results of this particular survey. At that time, they saw 2020 as well, at least 20% of the workforce would be independent contractors. And so, being an independent contractor means you're that 1099 employee. So, if that doesn't make sense for a lot of folks. So, in other words, you're going to be responsible for everything. You're bringing the job and you're bringing what you're marketing to companies because you've done those already. So if you're an independent contractor, if you're thinking like an independent contractor, or that business is one, if you want to throw in that phrase as well, you're going to approach businesses and say, hey, I did this for Facebook. I did this for Google. So when you get a couple of those names, of course, you're going to keep those expectations of salary and what you can get from the company. You may not be able to get a lot of the insurance aspect of it, but that was the idea behind a lot of that question. And so we followed them down to now, if the tenure is shorter, much like an independent contractor. So, it's going to go from a year and a half to a year, I think, the way that things look now, if you're going to be a smart marketer and a smart independent contractor.
Yeah, and I think kind of like even with like the Great Resignation, there's kind of like those stats of people are just either quitting their jobs because they don't want to go into the office, or they're looking at freelance jobs, or looking to becoming a nomad. And I think Jack's kind of article that got released that he talked about in that documentary series is there are other options instead of working the 9 to 5. There's multiple options, and I have clients where they still come to me for resume writing, but instead they have their own company. So they'll look for job postings and almost think of it as a sourcing mechanism of, here all the companies are hiring for this role. I'm going to come in and interview, but when it comes to the conversation, I'm going to ask for a contract because I want to be able to have more control and ownership and run this as my business as opposed to an employee. And because you are working as contract and you don't technically apply to all the benefits the company offers, they tend to pay higher salaries.
Yeah.
So if a job is 100K as a contract employee and you would charge for your business to the company, it can be around 130 to 140 for that same job, but you don't get any health benefits, access to like the snack room or whatever it may be. But
Right.
I've seen a lot of that happening lately as well.
Yeah. I think there's several tiers to this, in fact, and I think one of the things that we haven't even talked about yet is, well, while companies are taking that time, whether it's 6 months, 9 months, or to a year, they can fill that with a contractor, and maybe if you wanted, that contractor role might be yours, and it might lead to a full-time position. Where you can kind of control the conversation because you've been in the company and you performed the duties 6 to 9 months, and for them to eliminate the training time after you hire someone, that actually works to the person who is in contract and not particularly the company. So therefore they would have to not only respect your benefit and compensation request, but also it factors in that they save a lot of money because they don't now have to necessarily onboard as long as they would for somebody coming cold from outside the company. Does that sound right?
Yes, it definitely does.
Good deal. Good deal. Lastly, we have, and nobody's not saying much in the chat. So if you guys have questions, feel free. We gave you a whole bunch of stuff to consider and mull over. So if you don't, that's fine. You can watch and you can ask questions later. You can contact and follow Claudia, and we'll put her information up here in a moment again. But definitely want to get you to answer this question. Now, I know what Jack is basically going to say because he's gone to all the media and has said this. His thing is the future of work is remote. Period. Pretty much. And Jack is not here to defend himself, but for you, the future of work is, and fill in the blank.
Yeah. So for the future of work is bringing in 2 different non-traditional industries at the intersection. So here's what I mean. Yeah. So what, as we've seen, like now with the data and companies, it's really going towards like artificial intelligence, machine learning, robots, and doing the work and replacing a lot of people. But it's hard to replace something when it's 2 different opposing items. So for example, if you're marketing, maybe you want to start taking those data artificial intelligence classes because eventually they're going to want to, and some of them are already doing, but it's still in the early stages of it, they're going to need someone that's a marketing professional that also understands how data science works. So that
Hmm.
way they can become, one, you position yourself as an expert. Two, you're bringing intel that you know that they don't have and they
Hmm.
need you. That's going to be able to command you higher salaries. And you want to continue doing this as, whatever trends happen, where the industry is going. Another skill set is selling. Always, no matter, I don't care if you're an engineer or you're in project management, selling, that is the future of work. And it kind of goes with that theory of, one, if you become an independent contractor or they start looking at freelancers, you need to be able to sell yourself. The
Hmm.
interview process, it's selling. That's literally what it is. And if you're an engineer, you want to make an update, you want to start this new project, you need to sell to your manager, sell to the board, maybe sell to the executive leadership team. So when in doubt, I always say a sales skills is probably the most skill set that anybody should have. And
Hmm.
then two, we'll find that intersection of like, what is the two opposing industries and how can I bring them together? Because there's very few competition. Two, the marketplace is always going to go there, and there's very few talent like that. And even now, with marketing professionals with artificial intelligence, is very hard to find. And they
Hmm.
tend, because it's hard to find, they tend to offer higher end salary ranges.
Hmm. Yeah, Elaine had a response to it. Thank you very much for Elaine, and she's one of our regulars. He says that when we were working in the office, there were so many perks, parties, luncheons, ice cream, truck networking events. How will a company provide perks in the remote world? Very interesting question. You want to take a crack at it, Claudia?
Yeah. So, what is the question? Is it like, is there going to be perks to like
Basically,
working
how will
remotely or?
people working remote? I mean, when you're in office, you had the touch keys and you
Yeah.
had the snacks and things. In a remote world, what will be the perks?
So now it would be like more benefits that you can access from home, like LinkedIn Learning, access to courses like Udemy, maybe like some online workout classes that they'll probably, if they haven't done so, they'll do. I know for a client's company, they actually did a bourbon tasting. So they sent everyone bourbon and all the kits for them to create their own like old fashioned or something like that. That's going to be something, but usually that's for specific level. So maybe like on the director level and up. There's also going to be, um, like I said, other ones where they'll just send you like $5 Starbucks coffee, or here's a voucher that you can use, or gift card that you can use for like, I know for some companies do like mani pedis and massages, because
Mhm.
if they're more remote, they might just send you like a $5-10 gift card, or have a centralized location. Like in Chicago, if you go to this one massage, all our employees get free massages. Make sure you book an appointment, and then you'll be able to do all these other items. So they're going to have to get creative. I think that
Yeah,
it's still new, but they're also already discovering ways, because they had to during lockdown and COVID happening, that some of them already are being very progressive and innovative.
yeah. I think that people can't explore the benefits to or the perks through their benefits package. The gym membership has been something that has been offered recently, a little bit more often. I know someone that actually kind of negotiated a gym package because it went along with the company's
That
wellness and health theme. And they also got them to pay for a year of gym membership, which was a real to for a lot of people that's a big score, especially when their gym is like really close to their home. So therefore they don't have to work. And gyms are going to stay open apparently at this particular point. So that works for right now. But yeah, I've heard different things and people are getting creative. You'll have to be creative if you're thinking even if you're an employee, you should start thinking more like an independent contractor, truly as a business of one, because the more creative you are, the more that you'll be able to get the most bang out of your buck for your perks and your benefits. So try to make your benefits and your perks make more sense and have more of alignment. You may have to really put some thought into it and think about what could benefit your family, what will be helpful to you. And professional development is a real big one as well that we're seeing come up, and make it make sense for you. It doesn't have to be all what the company allows. It could be what you would want to ultimately. But the other part of it is, I also think too, is that just be ready that if you're looking to change careers and change jobs, and if you want to be constant, you're going to have to foot that bill yourself if the company won't. And that shouldn't be an obstacle to change if the company's not paying for that kind of thing. So hopefully that will help. But yeah, you probably can't. The company perks is something that they give you. It's sort of like a break time in that sense. They give you the break time, but lunch is mandated. You'll probably have to think like that and then get creative. But you've got to go in prepared first. So try to make the best of that time, Elaine, if that's where your head is. So for me, the answer, the future of work, and I love your answer, by the way, the hybrid of industries, of having expertise in two different industries is what you're ultimately suggesting, and making it into your package that you embody, and that way you do stand out, and that you're able to make forward. Am I understanding what that was correctly?
Yes, it's like the intersection of two different functions,
Yeah.
or industries. And if in doubt, right now, the big thing is like understanding artificial intelligence, machine learning. So if whatever industry you're in, start taking those classes, because now eventually throughout the years upcoming, there's going to be a huge increase of companies trying to implement the artificial intelligence just to stay
Mhm.
even competitive in the marketplace.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Love that. And that's kind of original, but I think that aligns with a lot of what we talked about here on the show. I think the future of work is the 1099 employee. I really do think and I'm not presenting that as something brilliant or something I thought of. I think the stars kind of aligned a long time ago, when as you think of yourself as the business person, you've got to handle your whole career in that way. And I think it goes along too with what I've talked about job search being a lifestyle, is that now you have to embody what your career is going to like wholly, rather than what you do 95 and what you do outside. Is that all of that, those lines are kind of crossed and gone for a lot of folks. For some people, you want to keep it separate, and I understand that. But I think for a lot of people, those your career and your lifestyle are going to align, and you can still partition your life and your work. But you'll be able to do it more seamlessly, and more integrated, to where it benefits yourself and your family. And even when you need to travel, whether it's on vacation or not. My daughter-in-law is here in town with my son, and she is at the hotel working, and doing what she does in a management position as a director. So she's taking those issues, but the way that she's would been able to go about getting her experience is sort of like what you described. A lot of little companies, little part times, those internships, all that added up into really a major offer in getting that. And then within several months, she was promoted from not being a manager to being a manager in a directorship position. So, all of that to say, I think, that people are moving forward, not only just because they want to move forward fast, because the world is moving that quickly in the world of work, and to the way that it's looking for people to fill roles even quicker. At the same time, people are still struggling to get that break into a company where there's a lot of interviewing. A lot of companies, especially the smaller companies, are making much more, or ignoring some of the rules that a lot of their bigger company counterparts are, and they're kind of moving forward with business because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to build a business. So I think
Mhm.
there's two different philosophies and two different approaches, and you've got to know your industry well enough and what their propensities are, what their habits are, being able to go to those markets and being able to present yourself to be what I call the prescription to your job description. By the way, I wrote a little post on LinkedIn about that. Check that out. But anything that we should know about, like your podcast? Are you reviving that for the fall, Claudia? What you got
Yes.
going on? What should people know?
So I'm starting season 2 of my podcast, and it's going to be more towards specific career coaching. So I brought in guests that are executives, recruiters,
Hmm.
talent, HR, human resources professional, and now it's gearing towards, all right, answering like, all right, now that you have this intel, this information, how can you accelerate your job search? What should you be doing? How do you identify what you're doing wrong? So going into specifics into that. And now, I mean, they can always check me out on Instagram as well and LinkedIn, where right
Hmm.
now I'm really trying to help professionals, especially since performance reviews are around the corner, usually around January, February. This is also the perfect time to start preparing for that. And, or just, or if they say no and kind of can't able to do so, then it'll pivot and prompt you to start job searching. But I'm actually creating right now word for word scripts that job seekers can use when
Hmm.
that will prompt the negotiation process once they get a job offer extended. So I'm very excited about that. So if anyone's interested in that word for word job scripts or salary negotiation scripts, they can just message me on LinkedIn and then I can send it to them through there.
And what's the name of the podcast?
Roadmap to the executive suite.
Roadmap to the executive suite. All right.
Roadmap,
We're looking
yeah,
for that.
roadmap to the executive suite.
Good deal. Be looking for that in iTunes and the other podcatchers that got going on. Look forward to my Friday show with Damian Burkle and I, and that's Claudia's been on there a couple of times. Check us out this coming week, Friday, 1 Eastern, and we stream to a lot of the same platforms. So this is Job Seeker Nation, and hopefully that you've gotten a lot of value out of today. We hope that you'll come back next Wednesday. We are doing it on the holiday, amidst the holiday week. So be sure that you check Jack and I out. We're going to have another great guest. I believe that week is Daisy Wright, who is also on the other show here. Thank you very much for joining us on Job Seeker Nation. Hopefully, you'll have a great week. Have any questions, feel free to follow both of us and also Jack Kelly, who left us not dry. So thank you very much. You have a great day. Thank you.